Well, hello and welcome to another episode of More Perfect Marketing. It's David Baer here, and today we're going to be talking about relationships. Now, this is a part of a lot of businesses that maybe you acknowledge, maybe you take for granted, or maybe you actually have found a way to systematize. This is something in our business that we spend a lot of time talking about with the clients who we've served because there's such a benefit, a long-term benefit to developing relationships with the customers, clients, patients who you serve as a business. And to help us with this conversation is somebody who knows this a heck of a lot better than I do. I'm thrilled to introduce to you Kandas Rodarte. Kandas, welcome.
Hi, it's good to see you, David.
Likewise. Uh, I said you know this better than I do. And while this is something that I spend a lot of time talking about in terms of the role that it should play in a business, right? The benefits of focusing on relationships with the people you serve can extend the time that they spend with you as a customer, can enhance the dedication, the amount they might spend, their enthusiasm to refer others to you. Um, but there's all kinds of ways, all kinds of approaches to how you build relationship. And some can be super labor intensive and some can be systematic. And I wonder if you can sort of introduce the topic and talk about some of the different ways that you've seen relationship building approached in business.
That's a good question. So, I started my career a very long time ago as a retail salesperson. I was my very first job was to manage a retail store. I was an assistant manager. And one of the things that we did was we kept little cards on our clients. So, and this is a retail store environment. And those little cards, we would write down their name and their phone number, and then we'd take a few notes about that person, and we'd make sure we had their mailing address and everything. And every time that person came in, we would get their little card out after they left, and we'd make little notes about what they bought or what they were looking for. And then when someone came into the store, we could make a phone call to them and say, "Hey, I know that you were looking for a blue dress 2 weeks ago. Are you still looking for a blue dress? There's one in stock now. We just had one come in, and then we'd invite them to come into the store. And the other thing that we did was we had these thank you cards. And whenever someone would make a purchase, we would send them a thank you card. And this is in a small retail boutique store
Yeah.
in the late 80s. And it was just such a brilliant way to in a mall. It was in a shopping mall. The store was in a shopping mall. It was just this brilliant way to build relationships right out of the get-go with a client, was to just, have a record, have a memory of everything they were doing and keeping a system in place. And so a few years later, I went to work for a manufacturing company in the outdoor industry. And it was one of those brands that, luxury brand, outdoor luxury brands. It was the North Face, people. This was a long time ago, though. It was when the North Face was cool. You know? And I just took that same concept when I was in inside sales, and I took that same concept. I kept track of my clients. I kept notes on them. I had a little day planner where I'd write notes about the people that I was working with and what they were looking for, and I would send cards to them. And I ended up making more money from my 0.5% commission than I did
Mhm.
from my salary at that company because of the relationships that I built with people. Now, you mentioned healthcare industry, or
Sure, sure.
I thought I heard you say healthcare
Well,
industry,
I think I
um,
often will say clients, customers, and patients,
and
because
patients.
yeah, because honestly, every industry, and this is part of the challenge, right? Every industry has their own nomenclature for the people they serve, and so I mention patients because maybe somewhere out there there's somebody whose business calls the people they serve a patient.
I love that. I love that. Well, patients, clients, whatever.
Hmm.
So, but you said that, and it brought a story to mind. So, I have a friend who was a vice president of the vice president of a company. It was a big company in the hospital industry. So his his staff was hospitals, and it was a lot of hospitals. And he would often go and visit these hospitals, and he would talk to everybody who worked there. He'd talk to the nurses, he'd talk to the doctors, he'd talk to the janitors. And if he had a conversation with someone and it made an impact on him, he would make sure he wrote down their name, and then he would send them a card and tell them how much he appreciated that employee, in the conversation that they
Hmm.
had. And then the next time he went back to that hospital, inevitably the janitor or the nurse would say, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sending me that card." And the card would be on their desk if they had a desk, or
Yeah.
it'd be hanging on the bulletin board in their office if they had an office. And that system of recognizing the people that work for you and then thanking them in a tangible way made him a rock star in the company. But it not only made him a rock star in the company, it made the employees loyal to the company because they felt like somebody there and the higher ups actually cared about their well-being.
So
And
you've mentioned cards in terms of means of communication a couple of times here, and it brings to mind a really famous story that I'm sure you know, which is the Joe Girard story,
oh, absolutely.
about one of the most successful car salesmen in history, and he communicated in this way too. And I think there's something, we've had David Foley on this show to talk about um, the direct mail industry and how it's so much easier to stand out from all the noise in somebody's physical mailbox these days. And I think that is a really important point to make here, because you just talked about somebody receiving something physically in the mail and then holding it on their desk or bulletin board, and it's a regular reminder of the connection that sender has to them, or in the case of those hospital employees, right? The psychological impact to the connection to being proud to be associated and representing that organization, right? There's something huge about having something physical and tangible.
And I don't know how much of the Joe Girard story you know, but he actually had employees. He had at least two people on staff who would
Okay.
spend their entire day writing cards for him. So it was he would send thousands of cards. His staff did, but it
Yeah.
really did work. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but I think he still has the record for selling the most cars in a single year. I think
The
he's
number
still
that I
I
that
might
I
be
think,
wrong.
yeah, I think it was something like 13,000 cars total that he sold, or just over 13,000 cars that he had sold. Yeah. And this was back in like
That's
the 19,
multiple cars per day.
yeah, 1960s, 1970s, that time range, when, you didn't have the reach that people have, through the digital age that we're in.
But it's not just repeat buyers with him. It's, hey, where'd you get your car from? And then they'd rave about him
Hmm.
because he didn't just send thank you cards. He sent, hey, I like you cards. Hey, happy Thanksgiving cards. Hey, happy New Year. I mean, he would send cards every month to these people. So they were constantly hearing from him. And that feeling of know, like, and trust, because people just, wow, it's another card from Joe. And along the opposite lines, my husband and I had a fantastic first time home buyer experience because our mortgage broker was so fantastic.
Hmm.
He was just awesome. And 5 years later, when we sold that house, we couldn't remember his name.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if he had just kept in touch, he would have gotten every house we ever sold afterwards or bought afterwards,
Hmm.
you know, or refinanced because, markets go up and down.
Sure.
So I don't know how many closings we've done because we've been married for 25 years. I've signed a lot on on mortgage papers, and I wish that I could remember who he was because he was so good. I mean, he helped us buy our first house when we were young. We owned our own business, so we couldn't really prove our income, and he took extraordinary measures, and we couldn't remember his name 5 years later
So
because he
here's
didn't
here's
stay in
the here's
touch.
the important takeaway for somebody listening to this story is, very often we think that if we do an exceptional job, that people will refer us, that people will remember us, and yes, that is true for a while, but at some point you forgot who he was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you probably even had records somewhere in the house that you could have, searched through and struggled to find his name, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lesson in the fact that there's probably additional actions that every business could benefit from in terms of systematically building upon that great experience so that when, Candace is going to be selling and buying again, that you're the one she calls.
I hate to come back to it because I keep coming back to it, but all he had to have done is put us in a system that reminded him to send us a happy anniversary card every anniversary of the year that we bought our house.
Yeah.
Like we bought it in April. Happy anniversary on on the purchase of your home. Next April, happy anniversary on the purchase. That's all he would have had to done.
Hmm.
One card a year, we would have remembered who it was, and that could have been done with a system, a database system. There's a lot of systems out there to do it. And I keep coming back to greeting cards because it's what I learned at my very first job.
Hmm. And it's
And
hugely
it
it's
it's been
hugely impactful. And I mean, this was this example that you just gave of an anniversary of when you purchased your home. Well, it's also not competing for your attention because it's not your birthday, it's not your wedding anniversary, it's not Christmas. It's something that is unique to the relationship that that service provider has with you.
hmm yeah, just that one little tiny little different thing to keep you top of mind once a year, and we would have never forgotten him.
It's amazing how little one can invest, whether it's time or, I mean, in this case, you work with these types of systems with some of the folks that you serve, who are running very small businesses, usually solopreneurs. I think, what is the term you use to describe the folks in your community?
Micropreneurs,
Okay.
micropreneurs,
And
micropreneurs. Yeah.
talk a little bit about the types of businesses that they run, what sort of industries or services they provide, and the types of things that you help them with when it comes to systematically or programming some form of relationship building into their businesses.
So I like to say that my clients are CEOs, chief everything officers, because they have to do it all. Right. And which is basically the way my husband and I ran our business. We started our business 2 months after we were married. And I was the CEO and he was the president. And eventually we had 6 employees. But when we started out, it was just us. And we just had to do everything. And eventually, we did have some people to help us, but we had to do everything. But we did it very successfully. And I want to, one of the things that made us successful is something that you preach, and that's niching down.
Mm-hmm.
We had a very, very narrow niche. My husband is a world class furniture maker, and he makes king size beds for antique furniture collectors. That
Mm.
is his niche. And we did very well in that niche. He's semi retired now, so he doesn't make a lot of beds anymore. But we did very well in that niche because it was so narrow. We had a specific thing that we did and a specific client that we worked with. So that's step number one when you're a CEO micropreneur is you have to figure out who your clients are. Who's that client audience? Who's that ideal client? And until you know who that ideal client is, the rest of it you can't do because you don't know how to message.
Yeah.
You can't just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks if you don't know what you're trying to get to stick. So step one is to identify who that niche is. And then, I mean, this is all stuff you know. And then you have to determine what your message is. And then you have to stick to your message. I colors and fonts and all that stuff is fun. And that's what a lot of people come to me for is to figure out the color schemes and the fonts and the
Yep.
logo, how to make the logo. First of all, I always say, here's my favorite person to design your logo for you. If that's the only thing you're going to spend on other than coaching, spend that money on your logo, get it professionally done. So that, I mean, but a lot of them, they can't even fathom designing
Hmm.
their own logo. But none of that really matters if you don't have your messaging down,
Yeah.
right? And it's not I'm the best so and so in the world. It's I make king size beds for antique furniture collectors. And antique furniture collectors have this certain kind of personality trait, and they're this way usually, and then you have to identify the things about them that make them unique. What is it that most of our clients have in common? Well, not only do they collect antique furniture, but they're also really conscious about sustainability, so they probably drive an electric car, right? And then you just keep going down. What else about them? What else about them? Because they collect antiques, what else about them do I need to know? Well, a lot of them have more than one house. Okay. What else do I need to know about them? And you just keep asking yourself all the things that you need to know about them. And then your messaging gets more tight and more narrow and better. And then you have to have a system to attract them and to follow up with them. The attraction part, I don't know why it's always been easy. So I don't have a system for that.
Hmm.
I don't have a system for gathering clients because that seems to be the easy part. The hard part is the keeping them, top of mind, keeping yourself top of mind with them, keeping the connection there,
Yeah.
building the relationship, building the rapport. And so I now have a podcast, and one of my furniture clients recently wrote a book, and she purchased her first piece of furniture from us 10 years ago. And we are still social media friends. And so when I saw that she purchased a book, or that she wrote a book, I reached out to her and said, "Hey, you want to be on my podcast?" Because I never let go of that relationship,
Yeah.
right? I just kept it, kept in touch with them. And you build, when you're building a piece of furniture for somebody, it's a very intimate thing. I mean, especially since it's a bed. I mean, it's their bed, but you're making it for them, right? So it's a very intimate, and you get to know them really well.
Hmm.
And so why, if you spend all that time, because it could take 9 months or 12 months from the time that they order it to the time that they get it. And then all that time you have to communicate with them constantly and let them know where you are in the process and all that stuff. After all that time, why let go of that relationship? I mean, you've built a rapport with this person. Why just let them fly away? Why not keep the rapport going? So, my system, I call it a colander.
Hmm.
my,
Okay.
my and most of the a lot, you got a funnel, you got this sales funnel, and you put a bunch of people in it, and it gets smushed, and not everything comes, it can, funnels get smushed, and not everything, it gets
Right.
clogged is the right word. But when you use a colander instead of a sales funnel, you keep rinsing away, and the dirt rinses out, and the good stuff stays in the colander. So if you rinse enough, the people who don't want to do business with you will have been rinsed away, and all that's left in your funnel or your colander are the people who want to buy from you. Do they want to buy from you now? Maybe. Do they want to buy from you eventually? Yes. You just keep rinsing them with good stuff. So the way that I rinse my customers is greeting cards. And I'm back to greeting cards again. But
Yep.
again, I learned it at my very first job when I was 18 years old. And I am a lot older than 18 now.
I,
So I
I
send greeting cards about
yeah,
3 times a year.
about 3 times a year. So
Mm-hmm.
how does somebody qualify to get onto your greeting card distribution list?
If you have a birthday and I know your birthday, I send you a birthday card.
I love that.
So I send about 700 birthday cards a year. Um, if you're in my immediate network, like I network with you regularly, you get a card from me every couple of months.
Hmm.
If you're a previous client, you get probably a holiday card. If I know your birthday, I'm going to send you a birthday card. And then I love to send uh, St. Patrick's Day cards because I love
Okay.
that the luck of the Irish. And my maiden name is Nesbitt, and that is an Irish name. It doesn't have an O in front of it, but trust me, Nesbitt is an Irish name.
Yes.
It's not O Nesbitt. Um, and so I like the whole luck of the Irish thing. And so I will send, I'm so lucky to have you, it's so lucky to have you in my network. It's so lucky to have you. I'm so lucky to have you as a client. But, just odd things. Sometimes I send fun things like recipes. Like in the fall, I might
Oh,
send
sure.
I'll put a recipe on the front of a card, for something like pumpkin pie spice or something like that. Here's your, if you want your coffee to taste like pumpkin pie spice, here's my recipe for pumpkin pie spice. Um, and and just little things like that. Recipes are really a lot of fun to put in cards, but just little touches that are unexpected, out of the ordinary, and that nobody else is doing.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay. So this is the mechanism by which you retain a relationship.
yes,
But I'm gonna guess you're sending 700 of these out a year.
birthday cards. I send
Okay,
two hundred
birthday.
cards a year. I
Got
mean, a
it.
month. So I send about
Okay.
1,400 cards a year.
1,400 cards a year.
Hmm.
So I'm going to assume, because we do this in our business too. We use a different service than the one that you use, but the impact I think is the same, which is that every time we send something unexpected out, we usually get somebody reaching out to us, thanking us, or commenting on what they've received, or reconnecting with us. And I mean, for my business partner, he doesn't even know the calendar that, we're sending these out on. So he's usually surprised by the phone call. Oh, it's so nice to, oh yeah, wasn't that funny? And he has no idea what they received. But I'm imagining that it is just the start of the next step of that relationship for you. So if I'm assuming
Hmm.
correctly and you're nodding that I am, I wonder if you have any stories to share on sort of the types of things that have gotten sparked by a card going out from you.
Um. Oh wow. Okay. You're making me think. I know that just the other day I got a text message that said, "Oh my gosh, thank you for sending a card to my son. You always, thank you for always thinking of us. It's so nice to get your cards in the mail."
Yeah.
And just that little thing. What I love, this happens so often that I'll be tagged on Twitter or Instagram, and it'll be a video of somebody opening a gift or a card that I sent them. And one of my favorites is a video that started with "This woman gets it." That started, "This woman gets it," and it was talking about how I had sent her a thank you card and gift. She had been a guest on my podcast,
Yeah.
and I send thank you cards and gifts to my podcast guests because they spent time sharing their knowledge with my audience. So I feel like I should thank them. And I've actually had conversations with other podcast hosts and said, this is what I do. And they have said, well, the gift was having them on the show. I don't need to send them a thank you gift because having them on my show was the gift. I gave them exposure. And I
Wow.
just don't think that I just
Okay.
don't think that that's quite right.
Yeah, I would say, that this is a gift for me to get to learn from you. And if there's some benefit that you get out of it, that's great. But this is more about me, benefiting from your wisdom, and hopefully our listeners benefiting as well. So I got to get something in the mail to you, I guess.
Yes, I'm expecting a thank you card. Yes, I am.
But
Oh, do you know I have a funny story to share? So in the morning when I wake up, I watch a couple of YouTube videos that's how I wake up, and I do a couple other things with YouTube videos on. And this morning's YouTube video was an episode of the Stephen Colbert Show where he is interviewing Hugh Laurie. Hugh Laurie was the doctor from House.
Mhm.
Okay.
And for
So,
those of you who watch PBS, he was on Worcester and Jeeves and Worcester.
oh, yes, that's true.
Yes.
And I think he's on a show now about a spaceship,
Okay.
but I don't know what it's called. Anyway, the last time that Hugh Laurie had been on the show, he had noticed that Stephen had a Segway, and he was playing with the Segway and riding the Segway. And so Stephen sent him a Segway as a gift. And so the interview starts off with Stephen telling the story and then saying that then I said, "Well, you never thanked me for the Segway that I sent you." And so he gave him a box of thank you cards. And Hugh Laurie ended up sending 57 thank you cards to Stephen Colbert for the Segway. And they read them on air, and it was hilarious. but Stephen didn't, he probably didn't really expect thank you card, but it's if somebody gives you a gift and you don't say
Yeah.
thank you, even if it's an email, I mean, it's just then don't expect to get another gift. Now this turned into a good bit, but yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway,
totally.
I interrupted you because I wanted to share that story. So
No,
what
no,
were
no.
you going to say?
I think that there's a certain degree. First of all, we've talked about him before on the show, and so I'll just mention. Uh, I had to go look at his book behind me because I couldn't remember his last name for a moment. Robert Cialdini, and the his book Influence and Persuasion, and the concept of reciprocity. And so, yes, if somebody does something for you, and this is a lesson that we learn in marketing, and relationships are certainly play a big role in this, right? People are more likely to want to do something in return because they feel an obligation, right? This is how we behave as people. And so this happened to me just the other day. A guy in one of my masterminds had a question. I said, well, why don't we jump on Zoom together? I'll walk you through how this thing that you were asking about, how it works, show you some of the resources I use. And at the end of our call, he sent me an email with a link to a $25 Grubhub gift card. I wasn't expecting that. I was just doing something because I saw that he needed the assistance. And so yes, you're absolutely right that it's and then I wrote him an email thanking him for that, by the way. Just to come full circle. But I think that understanding that the relationship stuff here, and this is a key to the types of things that you focus on, expressing gratitude for the people who are in your life, whether professionally or personally, and there is inherent reciprocity as part of that. And so if you're building systems to express gratitude as you have, and you teach your clients to, well, there's going to be some residual benefit as a result of it.
Oh, more than just a little residual. The thing I love about the law of reciprocity, though, is it doesn't necessarily have to be tit for tat,
Mhm.
right? If I do something nice for you, you may do something nice for somebody else because I did something nice for you.
Yes.
And that's also the law of reciprocity. And that has actually, that ripple effect has even bigger impact because eventually that ripple comes back to you,
Yes.
right? Ripples don't just go, they're not concentric, they're wibbly wobbly, as Doctor Who would say. So those ripples of kindness, they're wibbly wobbly, and eventually that kindness comes back to you. And sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it takes a while. I love to tell do I have time to tell a 5 minute story?
Yes, you can tell your
Okay.
5 minute story in the next 3 minutes.
In the next few minutes. Okay, so I'm
Yes.
going to do the very condensed version. This is about the law of reciprocity and gratitude and everything that we've been talking about and relationships, everything up to this point. So many years ago, my daughter's now 24, but many years ago, I was a Girl Scout leader. I wasn't just a Girl Scout leader, I was a leader at the service unit level, right? And there was a time where we ran out of people who would volunteer to work at the service level, which is like the CEO of your unit, right? And we needed people in those positions. And so I asked the council if I could throw a wine party for the leaders. So I threw a wine party for the leaders. Every single leader showed up to the wine party, and then I recruited a team to run the service unit from that wine party. And then I started doing other things too, like my troop would do region-wide events, and we would do all sorts of other stuff. And then we started doing Leader of the Year awards. All right. And the first year, I nominated somebody else to be Leader of the Year, and year after year after year, somebody else was the Leader of the Year. And then my daughter decided she didn't want to go Girl Scout anymore. She was a sophomore. She was, high school was hard, and so I let everybody know that was the end. We were leaving, and I expected that I was going to get Leader of the Year after 10 years of doing extraordinary things for the service unit, and I didn't get it. And I was kind of like, huh. And then I moved on, right? But then I was diagnosed with breast cancer a few years later, and something extraordinary happened. My family didn't want for food or anything for the 6 or 9 months that I was going through treatment. We even had a housekeeper come to our house that was paid for by a group of people that I will never know who it is. Mm. And that is the law of reciprocity. I didn't get the award from the Girl Scouts, but my family had food on their table and our house was clean when I was at the worst part, when I could barely walk because of the treatment I was receiving. And that's right there. That lesson right there is you just give. It doesn't matter if they don't appreciate what you're doing because somebody else will. Those ripples, those wibbly wobbly ripples are going to come back to you. So you just keep pushing it out. Just keep pushing out that kindness, and that kindness is going to come back to you from somebody else. That's the beauty of the law of reciprocity. There, did
I
I do it
love.
in 3 minutes?
No, that was great, and you did it in 3 minutes, and I have to say that that is one of the best examples of that lesson. I mean, I think there's something, um, to be said for. I'm trying to remember the Zig Ziglar, help enough people, and you can get whatever you want in your life. This idea is central to the way that people ought to live, because there's benefit to just being a good person and helping others. And if you can find a
Mm-hmm.
way to build that into the way that you operate professionally in addition to personally, right? Well, then you get the things that you're looking for in your business as well. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a great deal, a great lesson in the story and your experience. And that's an image that is going to stick around in my head a lot more than the Zig Ziglar phrase that I can't even remember. So thank you for sharing that. Listen, before we
Yeah, I
wrap
can't
up,
remember what it is either.
before we wrap up, I want to make sure that folks know where they can learn more about you, because one of the things that I learned about you very early on was, um, you're a hoot. You're incredibly entertaining, and we didn't give you an opportunity to really showcase that very much today. But I hear that you're an exceptionally sought after presenter and speaker, particularly on a lot of um, summits and virtual events over the last couple of years, and so I look forward to having the opportunity to witness that for myself. But if folks want to learn more about you and what you do and how you might be able to help enhance their business, where can they find out more?
So the website is relationshipmarketingcoach.com. Relationshipmarketingcoach.com. And everything you need to know about me is there.
All right. Well, that was concise, and we'll
I
of course
know.
we'll
I
of
know.
course have a link to that in the show notes, as well as to your other website, which I think has a super cool name, momgeek.com.
Oh, I've been momgeek.com since 2000 1999 or 2001. I can't remember now. But yeah, I've had that website for that long. But the thing is, with concise, with your marketing, concise is, I mean, you've got to be concise. Bullet points. TLDR is a thing. People don't want to read your crap. So just bullet point it. So I try to keep things simple.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that we were able to come in close to the 30 minutes that I allot for these. And I haven't been able to make it recently, but that's just because chatting with guests like you is just so much fun. Kandas Rodarte, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a treat.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed. Folks, if you know somebody who can benefit from the conversation you've just heard, and I'm pretty sure you do, please, by all means, pass along this episode. In the meantime, I'm David Baer, and I look forward to seeing you back here on another episode of More Perfect Marketing soon. Take care.